Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making to help us figure out what keeps us stuck and, more importantly, how do we get unstuck? I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Andrea Enright. And as a brand messaging mama, transition coach, podcaster, and speaker, Andrea Enright gives people permission to break free from their cage of cultural conditioning and be brave in the last third of their life. Usually wearing a hat and with a passion for writing and relationships, she helps people listen to the whispers and come home to themselves. The result is freedom. Andrea, welcome to the show.
That's right. Thank you so much, Karen, for having me.
I am thrilled to have this conversation. And there's so much, even just in your bio, that I could talk to you for hours. But let's start at the beginning. What's your backstory? How did you get to where you are now?
Sure. So I was born small town Midwest girl, very traditional upbringing, loving parents, the whole thing. Um, I also thought I was an entrepreneur from an early age. And so I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years. Graduated college during the dot-com, which is, a time when it was very like everything was great. Worked at a dot-com for a while, then quit, started my own business. And my arc then continued at 30. I had a successful business, and my husband and I said, we feel empty. What's going on? Our Banana Republic purchases, marathon training runs, and book club meetings were somehow no longer fulfilling. And we felt like we'd done all the right things, checked all the right boxes, and something was missing. So we rented out our house, packed up our life, and left and joined the Peace Corps at age 30. And that definitely changed the trajectory, of our entire life. So we were gone for 2.5 years, did the Peace Corps in Bulgaria, and then couch surfed and hitchhiked across the Middle East and North Africa for 9 months. Came back, gave myself permission to do that. Came back, reinvented my business, decided to just have one child and in a birthing center, God forbid. And then continued on I would say a trajectory of weird and wise choices across my life. I've reinvented my business several times, lived in Costa Rica for a year, and then eventually really just constantly was evolving, going through personal growth. And my biggest personal growth catalyst eventually was becoming polyamorous.
So let's talk about that. For anyone who's listening to the show who might not understand what polyamory is, how would you describe that?
So polyamory can be described or embodied in many different ways. How I'm embodying it is that I am married in a committed relationship, marriage. I have a daughter who's 14, and I have an outside romantic partner, and my husband has an outside romantic partner.
Okay, so both of you know about this.
Everything is above board, no secrets, all transparent.
So you and your husband still have a relationship? Do you have an intimate relationship too?
You do?
Okay, how does that work? Explain to me how that works.
I know. Believe
I'm
me.
a traditional kind of girl here.
It only took me like 7 years to figure it out. It's like, I mean, let's do it in 10 minutes. Um, yeah. So I would say that it really was in the beginning, we thought, our marriage seemed to have stalled a little bit. It wasn't that we didn't love each other still, but we just didn't see each other, right? You're just passing in the hallway and you're like, hey, yeah, I know you. We have our dynamic. It's really hard to change a dynamic after this many years, right? Particularly with a 6-year-old at home and, you're caught up, you're talking about Google Calendar. And something that Esther Perel talks about is that if two people come together and glom on, then there's no contrast or difference, right? And so this is kind of the ultimate paradox of intimacy and sex is that you need the contrast actually to create this like mystery or desire.
Hmm.
And when my husband and I got married, we actually said, you know what? We found this old model from a book in the 70s that said, look, you can either be an H or an A. And if you're an A, think of the letter A, you're two swing set poles and you're leaning on each other, connected in the middle. And if one falls, the other does too. That's how most relationships work. Not saying most, but codependency is a real thing, right?
Right.
We strived from the beginning to be an H, both on our own path going upward, but connected in the middle.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this was, a model from a psychologist, long, long ago, but we really liked it. We thought, okay, this is how we like to try and be. We both had married parents who are still married and happy. So I think we started from a healthy base and model. Um, but we really also wanted to escape the trap of just becoming Glondon and just becoming a we instead of
Yeah.
two us.
Interesting. So, how do you, this kind of a relationship, it's non-traditional. So I would think, but you tell me if I'm missing something here, that you two must have sat down at some point and said, what are the rules? What do we want to do and not do? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, well, I'll say that the H and the A were good for a while. And then it's like, oh, you know what? We tried, but we still kind of ended up like becoming one unit. And so when you sit down, I think we didn't know the rules. This is always the trouble when you're veering off the track, what we say the escalator of life, because I mean, why wouldn't you just stay on that escalator? There's
Mhm.
GPS, there's templates, people know what's next. You get married, you get a job, you have a baby, check box, check box, check box. And when we went off that track, we were like, shit, we don't know the rules. Like, so we had to do it as we went. And it was painful, super hard, not for the faint of heart. I mean, I don't, this may not be for you. We do not proselytize polyamory. We just say, look, this is how it was for us. It was my biggest personal growth catalyst. But to answer your question, the beginning, we didn't know the rules. And so we had to learn by fire. Now I have a whole list of rules I would give someone about polyamory, but you have to negotiate, okay, well, what's allowed, what's not allowed physically from a love perspective, where do you see this person? Do I meet her? Do I not meet her? How often do you leave the house? How often are you gone? There's so much to negotiate in the beginning, and it was incredibly challenging.
How did you do those negotiations? Did the two of you just sit down yourself and sort of talk things through? Did you use a mediator or a coach, or how did
you know,
this work?
so we did have a poly um, therapist for a bit that was helpful, but mostly we learned it the hard way. We would have conversations, and I noticed that often I'd be on board in my head, and then my body had a hard time catching up, right? So, I would he would say, okay, well, I'd like to go do this and be away for this weekend with my girlfriend. And I would say, okay, look at Google Calendar, do all the logistics linearly. I'm like, all right, I think that'll work. And then, Wednesday before, he would say, okay, so I'm going to be leaving on Friday. And I'm like, what? No, you can't do this. This is crazy. Who agreed to this? Why are we doing this? Like, it was an emotional reaction because it's really hard to get away from this cultural conditioning, right? It's like, no, you're not supposed to do this. This is wrong. And yet, I really believe that, our marriage had kind of stalled. I mean, I'm not to say that we would have necessarily gotten divorced or separated. I'm not sure, but we definitely were in a place where, and we had done therapy where like something wasn't working. And I think this stems from the idea that marriage has a very high expectation put on it. We are expected to be someone's co-parent, lover, financial partner, best friend, inspiration, housemate, financial man. There's so
Yeah,
many things.
yeah, 100%. And I think that's one of Esther Perel's points is that at
Yeah.
no time in history did we put so much responsibility, I guess would be the word, on our partner who is supposed to be our everything.
Yeah, well, exactly. No, this is the rom-com lie that I believed for so long. Fairy tales forever. You're my everything. You can read my mind. This was like sold to me as a soul connection that I could shoot for. And not to say you can't have soul connections, you really can. And I believe you can, and it's beautiful. And the fact, for me, I just know that like it's impossible for my husband to be everything that I need, and it's impossible for me to be everything he needs. Now, do you have to go out and find another romantic partner to do that? Not necessarily. It could come from a basketball league, or a book club, or a best friend, or an annual trip, to France, whatever. But I really think it's about like making sure you're not putting all of your eggs in that basket.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot about managing your own expectations of what do you get from this relationship, and being responsible enough for yourself to say, I know I won't get everything. I can get this piece that I need from my book club, this piece that I need from my job, this piece that whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That you're able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say too, it's also important to note that you, we, it's really hard to go against that grain, right? Because no one is like, no one, I mean, I did have some support from women, but a lot of people that I told were like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, although strangely, a lot of them also were like, boyfriend, where can I get one? Like,
Yeah.
how did you do this? How did you convince your husband to do this? We're not having sex, like, whatever. And so that does happen as well. I think it is beneath the surface in some way, not necessarily to be polyamorous, but to say, something isn't working here. How can we do things differently? And you can start small. I mean, in some ways, I did learn from my therapist, like maybe don't sleep together every night of the week. You're actually giving your energy away when you're sleeping with someone. What's it like to be alone on the couch one night a week? And for
Mhm.
me, it felt really good.
Yeah. I think, what you're saying resonates so much with the work that I do. I mean, I talk to people all over the world, and all I can say is you're not alone. Like a lot of people get to this point in their marriage, but what I'm curious about is how you start to have those conversations of like, who was the brave one that said, this isn't working for me. Can we do something different?
Yeah. So I think that's a good point. And my husband and I definitely started out with an open mind. We, had dabbled in, some playing with other people in the early days of our dating. And, and yet it had been many, many years since we'd done anything like that. Um, but we both just really did have an open mind about it. And so when I reconnected with an old flame and then went to meet him and thought, wow, there's some chemistry here. Like, I'm kind of curious about this. I mean, it was bizarre, but I came home and said, and I even told him, I said, hey, I connected with this old flame. I'm going to go have a beer with him. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, that's cool. You know, like, but we'd always been more like that. Like, if he would point out someone hot in a bar, I'd say, yeah, she's super hot. Not, I just, because that's normal. Like,
Hmm.
it's totally normal to keep being attracted to other people, even if you're not going to do anything about it. I think it's completely normal for me. And so we already had that openness a little.
Hmm.
And so I said, hey, I think I want to pursue this and like just see where this goes. And we were both at a bored place. And so he said, okay, like, let's try it.
That's interesting. And I think that the difference between what I see, the relationship that you have created, and let's be clear, you've created your own relationship. And what does it mean? What are the rules? What does it look like? And the relationship that most people end up in by default is a level of
Yes.
honesty.
Yes. So you're touching on so many things there. Like, I think the word default is like, well, you're just defaulting because this is how people do it. This is how everyone does
Right.
it. And I would say the honesty part is, I would have never called our relationship dishonest ever. I mean, I completely trust him. We're totally honest with each other. But here's what I found is that when we tried this, we suddenly became way more transparent about everything.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
not to say I was hiding anything before. I really wasn't. It's just that I became more tapped in because I had more alone time. I came home to myself. I reduced the codependency. My boyfriend was a mirror for me. So I was like, oh, wow, I do that. That is so annoying. I'm going to stop doing that. Also, I'm like, oh, wow, he's amazing. I'm amazing too. Like it presented this beautiful mirror. So then I came back into the marriage and was like, oh, we're going to try to repair this dynamic that has, and what happened then was that I said, you know what, I'd really like you to do? I'd like you to scratch my back for 20 minutes. Whereas before, like you get into this pattern of like how you have sex or like who does what or who initiates or what you like and what you don't like. And guess what? We're always changing. Like
Yeah.
things do change. And then you're like, oh, but I don't want to like offend him. So I just won't say anything. I'll just have him keep, rubbing my hair like he usually does, even though that doesn't really interest me anymore. Right. So I became like more tapped into what I wanted and then more free to say and ask for what I wanted.
Yeah, and I think that so many people don't get to that point. They don't, you get to a point in a relationship, especially one that's been going on for years and years, where you don't even know what you want anymore.
Exactly. Especially, it could be said, especially for a woman, although I hesitate to gender it at all, but I know I've heard a lot of women say, well, like, well, I don't even know where I want to go to dinner because I'm so used to catering to like what my sons and my husband want, right? Like if
Right.
someone asked me what I wanted to do, I'm not sure I'd even know.
Yeah.
And then there's also this passive aggressive trap where you're just like, well, no, I'm the martyr. You guys choose. And then you let them choose. And then you're just passive aggressively resentful about eating chicken instead of pizza.
Yeah. And the relationship you've created is polyamorous, but a lot of people also create relationships. I mean, it's more of a thing, but a quiet thing. There are a lot of different kinds of structures of marriages. I work with people who want parenting marriages where they say, like you have a daughter, and they say, look, let's stay together as co-parents because we're really good at that, and we don't want to mess up our kid, and neither one of us wants to lose time with our child while she's young. So, and getting a divorce means like by default, you're going to lose at least 50% of your time, right? So let's stay together as co-parents, but create rules so that we can each live our own separate lives. So we can be, to your point, that H instead of the A, right?
Yeah,
And other
exactly.
people later in life create what I call legacy marriages. It's like, look, we've spent our lifetimes building a nest egg, building something that we want to leave whole and intact for our children when we die. And we know that if we get a divorce, that nest egg is going to be split at least in half,
Mhm.
which leaves us less investing power, less ability to pass to our kids. And oh, by the way, a substantial chunk is probably going to go to the divorce lawyers and all the divorce professionals, right? We don't want to do that. We don't want to blow apart our family. So we'll just create rules about how we live. And especially when people are at a certain income level, people have been living in two separate houses in two separate places for eons, right?
Right.
If you had the money to do that.
Yeah, and you're tapping into really what is I feel like my most important message to share, if like, is that you have a choice. Like I am not proselytizing for any, and the type of poly I'm doing totally different than what most even poly people I know. Like we have a very particular arrangement. Some people are all living in the same house. Some people are having an additional parent. Some people are, I mean, it varies in a huge way. And however you do it, great. But the point is, there's more than one way to do it than the classic monogamous, both live together. That's all. Like, and I want to give that message to the world and also, to my daughter. Like, it's your life. Like, live it how you want. As long as there's kindness, love, and consent, it's fine.
Yeah, so let's talk about that consent portion, right? So
Sure.
you and your husband clearly consented, but was there a time when one of you wasn't on board, and how did you navigate that?
I mean, I think it gets a little messy when, at some point he says, well, I want to do this. And I'm just like, well, I'm not okay with that. And he's like, well, why not? And, and so you can come to a head there, right? Where you eventually just know like you have different desires. And so we've always worked it out that, we compromise, like I give a little, he gives a little. Um, and, it's such a great walk through your own honesty with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, wait, am I doing this out of pettiness? Is it just my emotions talking? Is it just my ego talking? Because ultimately, our goal, which is even hard sometimes, even for me to still swallow now, is that like our goal is to make sure that we support each other in our becoming, right? I want my husband to be the most extraordinary expression of himself, and he wants the same for me. And that may look different in the future. I don't know.
You know, you
That's hard.
bring,
It's really hard,
yeah, but you bring
but
up a
it's, yeah.
good point. You know, you've created this arrangement, and that's one of the other differences from a traditional marriage, which is supposed to be till death do you part. Well,
Yes.
this sounds like you both realize that at some point you could choose a different arrangement and what you have now doesn't work anymore.
It may, right? And it's hard. I mean, it's nerve-wracking, no doubt about it. And I just feel like I have come home to myself. I have claimed myself. It's me, it's not like me and him against the world. It's me. And he is a big part of my world. And so are a lot of other people and other ideas and scenarios. And I'm comfortable with that. And it is something I'm not ashamed of and I don't want to hide. I don't think it's messing up my child. I think it's a good message. Like we're doing it this way. You can do it however you want. And I
Right.
can only speak from, 15 years into a marriage. I don't know how it would be to start like this. I don't even know if it would work for us. Like it might have never worked for us to start this way. Every
Mm-hmm.
situation is different.
Well, what about, all right, so we've talked about honesty within the marriage, but you've both got outside interests. How does that relationship, I don't know if you can speak about your husband's relationship with the other person, but like your relationship with other people, how does that work? What do you say to them? Like, here are my rules, and this is what we can have, and this is what we can't?
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes like, I've said that I had a boyfriend for a long time who was not poly. He was a bachelor, unmarried, no kids, and he didn't like sharing me at all. But he was like, "All right, this is the only way you're going to do it. Then I'm in." Sometimes I think it'd be easier. It might be easier to date someone who's also poly, who also has, is married to someone else and has kids, and then they understand my commitment. But then time's so difficult, right? Like, when can you get together, right? So you really just have to be completely honest, about like, okay, here's the situation. Here, my husband's on board. We're all good. You can meet him, you can chat. Like everything is super talked about on the top, transparent. That's the point. It's the opposite of cheating, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it is the antidote to it because
You don't have
thousands
to.
of people, and I'm not judging anyone. It's hard, and I've not been in those shoes, and that's incredibly challenging as well. And I don't want to do that. My husband didn't either. Not to say we were even on the brink, but like this was a better path for us.
Yeah, I think you were wise. Like, I love the weird and wise. I think that's awesome. But you were wise to say, to realize, things aren't working and we need to do something different. We've tried therapy, we've tried all these things. Because what I see in working with people is it's like you become a pressure cooker. And at some time, I just tell them, look, you don't have to work with me. You don't have to make a decision about your relationship. You don't have to change it. You don't have to do diddly squat. But if you don't, one day I'm going to tell you how this is going to go because I've seen it over and over and over. You're going to do something stupid, probably in the worst way at the most inopportune time. And then you're going to be kicking yourself.
So
Why
true.
did I do this? And it's because you're a human.
Dropping it down. Right. We're normal. And this is about permission to be human. There's something called the region beta paradox, which I read about recently, that is this phenomenon that if things don't get really bad, if they're just good enough, then you don't make a change. Right. And it is a little bit of something that almost argues that like, if you have a little more serious trauma, then you're going to leave. But if it's just kind of meh, not that good, you're just going to be like, well, oh well, I guess I'll just stay, right? And marketing principles prove that we work much harder to keep what we have than to get something new. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I do think that it's possible there are people who are like, yeah, but like, what else would I do, right? If they're unhappy in a partnership.
100%. And you've just voiced the struggle that so many people have. I think a lot more people have this than are willing to admit it. But I just know that I've worked with so many people who say, I don't know if it's bad enough to leave. I'm not happy. I'm not, but like nobody's getting beaten, nobody's, a gambler, nobody's an
Right,
alcoholic. Is it
right.
really bad enough to leave? And my question is, why does it have to be bad enough? Is it,
There's a whole other study by Baumeister that says like we just avoid the bad, right? That's our whole goal. Like, like as long as they don't get divorced, as long as they don't drink too much, as long as my child doesn't become anorexic, then we'll be okay, right? Like those kind of, that's kind of our tends to be our attitude. I don't know why, instead of like going toward the joy and being like, no, I would be so much happier. But and also, it's divorce, especially, is like a total pain in the ass and so expensive,
oh
even if
yeah,
we wanted to get divorced. Like we talked about it, like, oh my God, we have to have two houses. And like, and, just it's quite a project. But
yeah,
obviously, if you don't want to live with that person, I get it. But yeah, it's just a different thing. And for some people, that's the right choice. I certainly don't want
right.
to.
It's like anything else. Freedom has a price, right? And for some people, like some people, their values, their lifestyle, their upbringing would not allow for the kind of relationship that you have, which is also fine. But, to me, I agree with you in terms of what my message is to the world is life is about choices. And to first understand that you have choices because so many people don't even see that piece, right?
Yes. And this
So
is,
yeah, so you talk a lot about, and your life has been amazing and all over the boards and very, we'll call it non-traditional. Um, but you've given yourself permission to do a lot of things that other people typically don't do. So, and I know that part of what you do now in your work is to coach other people to help them give themselves permission to do whatever it is. How do you do that?
mm, yeah. So I think a lot of it has to do with helping people go within and sit by themselves and really listen to their inner desires and their whispers, because that's just something that society doesn't support very well
Oh,
for
yeah.
us. It wants us to keep going. Like, the generation, our parents' generation is like, don't stop moving, like just keep going, right?
Mhm.
And so you have to go zig society zag to like sit on the porch for an hour and not look at your phone. I mean, I dare you to do that. Like, so part of it is coaching people through that inner peace that's hard and really uncomfortable. And then the other piece is starting small. Like I started small with permission, right? I mean, there was like I'd always been, for example, I'd always been really obsessed with cowboy boots and cowboy hats like my whole life. But, my parents, like, we didn't live on rural route two, and I didn't ride horses, and we didn't have a barn, and I didn't wear Wranglers. And so like, well, I can't do that. I'm like, that'd be a poser. Like that's just, I was like stuck in my bucket, right? I'm just like, no, I have to be this.
Mhm.
And then I went to this yoga training like 15 years ago, and I was like, oh, I'm like, people are wearing like pearls with shorts and tennis shoes with dresses, and which of course I'm like way out of that now, but like breaking the fashion rules. Oh my gosh, like, they're doing things that were different than I thought they were. They were breaking the rules. And I thought, well, I can wear cowboy boots if I want, I guess. So literally big effing deal. Like I wore my cowboy boots with my yoga pants and went to my yoga training. And of course, nobody cared because who cares? But for me, it was a big deal. And it was kind of a threshold. And then but small permissions lead to bigger permissions. Then I named my company The Boot Factor because I wanted to celebrate authenticity. I was being my authentic self. And then I started wearing a cowboy hat all the time, even to go pick up my daughter at school. And like, nobody does that, but who cares? It's my thing. And, I think my daughter was probably my biggest teacher of this because she came out of the womb this way from the beginning. And there was a story where there was like an Easter egg hunt one day, and she really wanted to wear these Christmas pajamas that said like I heart Santa across the top.
Ah,
And I was like, you are so not wearing these pajamas because, I just was
it's
so worried about
Easter.
what people thought, right? Like I'm just like, oh my God, I'm gonna look like a horrible parent. dressing my child in Christmas pajamas and Easter egg hunt. I said, honey, that outfit doesn't really go with Easter. And she says, well, it goes with me.
Ooh. Okay,
So
so I have to ask, did she get to wear them?
yeah, she did. Yeah, she sure did. I had to surrender and let go.
I love that. And that actually brings up another interesting piece. I mean, what is the role of surrender and let go in this whole permission kind of situation?
It's huge. And I mean, I work on it every day. It's like
How?
surrendering to myself, like embrace first it's embracing impermanence. I think that's the one of the biggest lessons I've learned is like you have to just know that things are changing all the time. Your husband's feelings are changing, the weather is changing, your child is changing, you are changing. Every day we're a slightly different person. So knowing that, but I think yeah, that surrendering to myself really it took detaching from my husband for a while, which was super painful. Like not in a physical or logistical way, but just in a like, oh, it's just me. And I did 100 days of haiku, where I, wrote a haiku every day. And it was really fun and a beautiful exercise in like my own processing. And one of them was saw an old friend yesterday, couldn't quite place her. Wait, that's a mirror.
Interesting.
So like really recognizing yourself as your own best friends and knowing that like you'll be okay by yourself. It's okay to have other people, but like, oh, it's hard. It's super hard. I still don't like it.
Yeah, and that's also huge because so many of the people that I work with, honestly, one of their biggest fears is if I leave this, what if I'm alone for the rest of my life?
Yeah, totally. I still
You know,
worry about
people
it. Like,
people can't be alone for 5 minutes without a phone or a device or a screen. And that
there
the
you go.
thought of having to be alone, like for longer, like you might not have a partner, you might not, that's terrifying.
So you just made the connection. That's it. I mean, because if you spend enough time alone, that like I didn't used to need alone time. I'm super extroverted. And once I spent time alone in the beginning of the poly, I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. This is so hard. I'm so uncomfortable. I'm so uncomfortable. And then eventually you get through the other side. And I'm like, and now I crave my alone time. I need my alone time. If I don't get it, I'm not doing well. And so that's part of the training, right? Surrendering to yourself, building a relationship with yourself is the most important thing. And that prepares you then to keep surrendering and keep giving yourself permission.
And how do you do that? Because I know that one of the other things you do, you're branding and messaging, right? And being authentic is really important to you. So, how do you bring your authentic self in all your weirdness and wisdom into the work that you do day to day? How do you use that?
I'm just so self-expressive. I mean, I just love expressing and sharing. And that is what I help others do and help my clients do is say, look, the only way that you're going to stand out, the only way I'm going to be attracted and keep reading is if you show me your humanity, is if you do it. If you tell me about the 72 owl figurines you have in your living room, or you tell me about the Diet Coke you have hidden in the basement, or you tell me, that that you get up at 4:44 every morning because you're superstitious and you've been doing it since you were 20. Like everyone has these weird quirks about themselves. And the more we share, the more people think, oh, well, yeah, I get that. I'm weird too. Because everybody is in a little way.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but like that, I really just love to help people be brave to say, like, yes, show people who you are. I'm not talking about private versus public. Like, I get it. Like, we don't need to share all of our private stuff, but tell me who you are, because chances are I'm going to get it. Just we're all, what brings us together is much bigger than what sets us apart.
Yeah. And it's also way more interesting.
Yes. Right. Like, tell me, I mean, I introduce myself often when I speak as a dedicated mama, a mediocre runner, and a bad vegetable eater because I am.
Oh no, you're a bad vegetable eater?
It's
Ah,
terrible. I do my best, but I hate broccoli and cauliflower. So, but that's just who I am, right? We've all got those things, right? Like maybe you suck at recycling, or maybe you're, always sneaking over to the grocery store and getting Doritos, even though you're buying your milk at Whole Foods. Like, just like,
I love it. The reason I'm laughing, the reason I love it is because it's so real. We all do it, and we all try to hide the part of ourselves that we think
no.
is socially unacceptable. And sometimes we're hiding it even from ourselves, which is really mind-blowing to me. It's like, how do you not know what you are like? There is no hiding, but we make so many excuses for why that doesn't really count. Like, I
Mhm.
know I just ate that Dorito and I'm supposed to be, a health nut, but it's because it was Tuesday, like
Good one.
something that makes no sense at all.
Right. This is all about perfection, though. It's all about just like, oh, we're supposed to be perfect, it's supposed to be perfect, it's supposed to be perfect. When really perfection is so boring. Like, no, I don't want to hear about the polished model. Like, that's not interesting. I want to hear about how you yelled at your kid this morning and then you got a speeding ticket on the way to work because it happened to me. Like, and there are moments, and then we let them go, and then another moment comes, and we're hugging our child, and just there it can all be broken down into moments, but it is hard because a lot of people don't, they're so afraid to step off that pedestal.
Yep,
um
100%. It's a big pedestal to step off of, but what do they say? The bigger you are, the harder you fall. So getting
Ooh.
too high on that pedestal is actually not doing you any service.
No, and we call that extreme expert syndrome. Like when someone is on the stage talking down, and I got this from one of my mentors, Ellen Malcolm Moore. When someone's on the stage talking down to you, you might check the boxes and say, oh, they're very credible, they're very smart, but I can't see them, I can't touch them, right? And that's not helpful. Like, I want a human connection. We all want a human connection.
Yeah.
And when I'm real, that happens.
Yeah, I love that. And I've loved our conversation. Tell me if you can, um, where can people find you if they're interested in working with you,
Sure.
either because they need to give themselves permission or they need help with their branding and messaging? What's the best way to reach
Right.
out to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have two different services. One, I'm a personal brand messaging storyteller. And so I mine people for their magic, right? And you can find me on LinkedIn. My website is under construction because I am in the middle of a rebrand. I'll keep the hat, but doing some rebranding with my design and logo, et cetera. And I help them really find confidence and clarity in clients so that they can show up as themselves and feel good about it on social media, on LinkedIn. And then I'm also a permission coach. And so this ties in with my podcast. I have a podcast called Permission to Be Human. And it's really about we say it's like two midlife maverick women processing, sharing, sometimes in real time, about all of our weird and wise experiences on taboo topics like marriage, sex, relationships, friendships, money, death. Um, and we also then hold retreats, workshops, and we just started holding in real life events in Denver, Philly, and Boston. They're called Brave Heart Conversations. And everyone is welcome to come, and we just do a Q&A, right? We're talking about, why are you stuck? What's happening with you? Boundaries, relationships. Doesn't necessarily have to do with poly at all, FYI. It's just about like, where are you feeling stuck on something that is hard to talk about, or you're not getting, the right insight on. So you can find us at permissiontobehuman.live. Our coaching is there, our podcast is there, our events are there. All events, I'm in Denver, held at the Goddess Temple. And yeah, I want to help people be brave in the last third of their life. And this is all in support of that.
That sounds amazing. So for those people who are watching or listening, I would highly encourage you to go check out Andrea's podcast, her events, her coaching, all the things. And Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your weird and wise wisdom here with us.
Thank you, Karen. It's been such a pleasure.
This has been glorious. I could keep talking to you forever, but in fairness to you and in consideration of your time, I think we're going to call this a wrap today. And for those of you who are watching or who are listening, if you enjoyed today's conversation, if you want more of it, please, I encourage you, like the podcast, like the YouTube channel, subscribe to both, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.